I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our Life Stories Conversations. And I'd like to start by asking you just to introduce yourself and talk about your role here, what brought you to this work.
Thanks. My name is Lorilee Wastasecoot. I am a curatorial intern here at the University of Victoria Legacy Art Galleries. I've been working here since 2016. I started out as a work-study student while finishing my degree in political science at UVic.
Which is amazing.
Yes,
Yeah.
I did. I started as a work-study student in 2016. I began, at doing the reception here and just getting my foot in the door and learning how to care for objects, learning how to engage with the community when they come into this space. And then from there, I did some school tours with children here in the space around an exhibit called The Time of Things. So that was about time and the circular motion of time rather than the linear. So I began doing some educational programming around that for the school tours, and I also helped assisted Dr. Andrea Walsh in the curation of an exhibit called There's Truth Here. And in this exhibit, my father had a painting that he had created in residential school in 1960 under the tutelage of Robert Aller. I became involved in this work because in 2015 I became aware of my father's painting that he created in 1960 at the Mackay Indian Residential School. And my family was not aware of this painting that he created, and in 2015 I met Dr. Andrea Walsh for the first time with my parents, and she had contacted my dad earlier in the summer to let him know that the University of Victoria was in possession of a painting of many paintings created by children in residential school. And one of the paintings was done by my father. And so in 2015, we went to the Cornett lab, the anthropology lab at Cornett, and Andrea showed us the paintings from that collection, and it was a very poignant moment for our family. I had never seen anything that my dad had created as a child, and I was very curious about these paintings, and I wondered, why the university had them. I was very apprehensive at first, thinking about, who this teacher was, and was he a nice person to the kids, and what my dad painted. I was worried about what we might see, and when it came time to look at his painting, he just looked at it and kind of let out this sigh of relief. And so me and my mom were also relieved, and we approached and looked at the painting. And he had painted a picture of his mom and his dad and himself, and I think his little sister Brenda. But it just made me feel like, this is what he was thinking about when he painted it when he was 10, his family, his mom and his dad. And, it was really heartbreaking. And so That's why I wanted to stay close to the paintings. Once I knew that they were being kept a part of the university collection, and then once I had learned that they had repatriated the Alberni Indian Residential School paintings back to their families, I thought, oh, well then, I guess you'll be repatriating these back to our families as well. And so I was determined to stay here and learn about the care of the paintings and how we could get them back to Manitoba.
So how did you come to Victoria?
I came to Victoria in 2010 with my daughter, Brooklyn, and we moved here from Winnipeg to essentially try to start our own life here. I wanted to go back to school, and to be perfectly honest, I was, kind of fleeing, just some relationships in my life that weren't healthy. And so I came here with my daughter to go to school, and I thought that I quickly found out that education for me was extremely healing, and for me to be able to learn about colonization and those types of systems that oppress Indigenous people, that was very cathartic but also very emancipating for me to understand what was happening to us as Indigenous people in the past, as well as what's happening in the future here. But I had come here to go to school, and I brought my daughter, and so we began to settle into our life here. I began going to Camosun College, and I got my Indigenous Business Leadership diploma from there, and I realized at that point that I was not interested in doing business. I really found that focusing on the politics of Indigenous people and the things that was very important to me.
Yeah.
And so I began my political science degree at UVic in 2015, and it was at that time that I had met Andrea Walsh, who had told us she had our paintings up in the anthropology lab. Little did I know before 2015, though, that I would, in 2013, I had gone to the Victoria Conference Center with my daughter because we had seen some Indigenous people gathering outside of that building. And so we followed them into the space, and we saw that there was all of these children's paintings created by children in residential schools. And the first person I thought of when we entered that big room with all of those paintings was my own dad, who had spent 12 years at the Mackay Indian Residential School in Dauphin. So little did I know in 2015 I would be meeting Andrea Walsh, the person who had put on that exhibit at the Victoria Conference Center in 2013, that I would be also, that my family would be reconnected with a painting my dad did from his school by the same teacher, Robert Aller.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
This painting is more than just a painting to me and my family. It's very, very, very precious to us. It hangs in our dining room in my mom and dad's house. And it just serves as a reminder of the types of experiences and life stories, of my own father and his family, and what it was like to go to residential school and then to come home, and then having to adjust to a whole other different way of living away from your family. And it also represents to me the love that never died for many of these children, including my dad. It never died. He loved his parents, and he hung on to those feelings while he was at the school. Sad as it sounds, but he just continued to never forget, who he was and where he came from. And you see that a lot in the paintings in the collection. They're pictures of the land, people's homes, their families. So I think the paintings tell very important stories by children who were in those schools.
Yes. So would you like to say more about the exhibition, There is Truth Here, that you were part of with Andrea Walsh?
Sure, yeah. So in September 2017, Andrea Walsh curated an exhibit here in the Legacy Art Gallery called There's Truth Here. And the exhibit featured 4 schools. They were the Inkamik Day School in Osoyoos, the Mackay Indian Residential School in Dauphin, Manitoba, the Alert Bay, so the St. Michael's Residential School in Alert Bay, and the Alberni Indian Residential School in Port Alberni. And so we had each section in the exhibit, and Andrea Walsh had asked me to curate the section, the Mackay Indian Residential School section. And for me, that was a very important lesson in curating and care from her, because it demonstrated to me that, well, first of all, that nobody's ever asked me or my family, to represent ourselves in these spaces before. And I thought, really? Curate? What do you mean? You mean curate? Make my own decisions and say what we want to say. It was really powerful for me to learn that from her, and it's become a part of my practice now, where it's very important that we self-represent and tell our own stories in our own ways. And that meant so much for me when she asked me if I would like to do that. And so I did. And each survivor gave their consent to have their paintings up on the wall for the exhibit, which was very important, because it's important to ask, and so that meant a lot to me and my family. So the exhibit ran from September 17th to January 6th, 2018. And over the course of those months, we did about 45 school tours, post-secondary faculty, staff from UVic came down. We conducted the tours. I led most of them.
Oh, fantastic.
And it was, again, a very cathartic, powerful, healing experience, sharing my story as an intergenerational residential school survivor, as well as my dad's.
Yeah.
And so it was, I think maybe I may have burnt myself out in a way, but all very important lessons to be learned, It's taking care of yourself while you're doing this emotional work in these spaces, especially when it's about yourself and your family. But all in all, even though I was emotional and tired and a bit drained when the process was over and the exhibit was over. It was very, very rewarding. And very important that that exhibit be shown, because again, it was coming from the perspective of the children themselves, not from adults.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they were speaking from their hearts when they were children, and their art demonstrates that. And so that was, yeah, an amazing process and exhibition to be a part of, and it definitely inspired me to move forward and keep some of, like, I guess I've really adopted a lot of those practices of curating with care, and allowing Indigenous people to talk about their own stories in their own ways, and also giving up, you know, the fact that when you're a curator, you don't I guess when you're a curator, you don't have all the answers, and that's okay. I mean, I come at curating from a different kind of perspective, a community perspective, an Indigenous perspective.
So how do you feel those the curatorial practice that you've evolved through your practice continues to inform what you're doing here today?
Yeah, so when I was curating this exhibit about the baskets, I really wanted to make sure that I was speaking to people who basket weaved and who come from these territories. I can't speak to their experiences as Salish and Nuu-chah-nulth people, but I can help them tell their stories in a way that is respectful and in the ways in which they want their stories to be told. And I think that I've really come at this exhibit again with a community perspective in mind, that we have to again give up that power that we are this, you know, these all-knowing curators, and we're the authority on everything when we're not. I mean, I know I wasn't. I searched for a way that I could connect to baskets in this exhibit, and I found a connection through the porcupine quill baskets that we have in our collection that were also collected and donated by Robert Aller. And so I also, when curating this exhibit, I wanted to make sure that this exhibit was relevant to the people of this island. So I chose to focus on the Salish and Nuu-chah-nulth baskets we had in the collection, because there's so many Salish and Nuu-chah-nulth people living here in Victoria as an urban center that it would be wonderful to have Indigenous people come in here and be able to say, oh, there's my granny, and there's her work on the wall. You know, it's a source of pride.
Yeah.
And I think that allowing that to happen and take place is a curator's job, kind of like managing relationships and connecting people to their objects, and also to each other, you know. Because
I love how you've put that as a curatorial purpose.
So, you know, I tend to think of curating as more about people rather than objects.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful.
So, And it's been really incredible opening up this space for regular community people to come in and have some time upstairs with the baskets, and some time down here with the baskets. And these baskets have been in the vault for many years, and it's been so wonderful to have them out in the open and have people gather around them. And I often think of these baskets as grannies as well, grandmothers, ancestors, that have their own stories to tell, and that they probably love the visiting going on and all the talking going on around them, right? Like I love them. So, the baskets are a lot like the grandmothers and ancestors.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It's been so comforting having all of these women and grandmothers, grandfathers on the wall. I think it's really warmed this place up a bit.
Yeah. And the remarkable photographs that you've chosen,
Mm-hmm.
bringing the basket makers to life as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real contribution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these aren't just objects, and these aren't just nameless people on the wall. They have lives and families, and they have so much knowledge in them to be able to create these baskets in the first place.
Yeah.
The knowledge to prepare and harvest the materials, that knowledge of like when in July we need to pick these roots. And it's just incredible how this knowledge continues to recycle itself.
And so many of the photographs you've chosen emphasize sort of the intergenerational dimension
Mm-hmm.
of the family being part of this, and the community, this entire network of relationships, or mesh or webwork of relationships that come
Mm-hmm.
with the basket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They just, I think a lot of people forget that, we're all connected, and that when one piece is not working, it affects the whole.
Yeah.
And so part of my responsibility, I feel, at this stage in my life is to, help bring these stories out, because they're healing and they're medicine for our people.
Yeah.
And it's important that we tell them in our own ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than having somebody take our information and put their own spin on it and put it on the walls. Which is also why I really appreciated Uli's book, because she includes first-person quotes by the weavers and the artists themselves in the book.
Yes, you've included those in your exhibition. Those are fabulous.
Yes, because I could have wrote something, but why would I?
Yeah.
So, I think us having our own voice
Have those voices,
is really important. And Uli didn't spend a lot of time talking about herself in the book. She just produced a bunch of really beautiful photos of grandmothers, and I know I'm just so grateful that there are people like Uli who did take and document these artists at work.
So I'd love to hear more about things that have kind of guided you along your path to where you are, or serendipitous finds or eureka moments where things have sort of come together for you.
Mm-hmm. So I really feel like there's a reason I'm here and where I'm at today, because and I really feel that I've been guided in this process by my ancestors, coming to Victoria in 2010, I kind of just took a leap of faith, hoping and praying that moving to Victoria was the right thing to do with my daughter at that time. And finding out that my father's painting that he created here, that was here in the anthropology lab at UVic, right next door to the class I was attending that morning, reaffirms my belief that I was led here for a reason, and that I have a responsibility to make sure that those paintings get back to my family, but the other residential school survivors and their families as well in Manitoba. And so in 2015, when I saw the paintings and I spent time with Andrea and my parents, I realized, this is why I moved to Victoria. Since then, it's only just reaffirmed my belief that I have been guided and led in this work. When Mary Jo Hughes first approached me to work on this basketry exhibit, I got very excited and passionate about it because my grandmother Mariah also made things by hand. And she made caribou and moose hair tuftings, mucklucks, gauntlets, moccasins. And she was very well known within her own circles. But much of her work, like the grandmother's baskets here in the exhibit, went unrecognized and unacknowledged. And so she was my biggest inspiration in this exhibit, and I really feel like I've carried her throughout this process as well. My mentor and teacher, Andrea Walsh, she gave this exhibit its name, We Carry Our Ancestors. And after I had finished speaking to Mary Jo about the possibilities of this exhibit, I began to do research in the library upstairs in our classroom. And one of the first few books that I pulled out of the library, one of them had a picture of my grandmother on the front cover. And inside the book was numerous Indigenous artists, and one of them was my sister. And they were asked to submit a photo of one of their artists or relatives, one of the relatives that inspired them the most in their artistic practice, and she chose my grandmother Mariah.
Oh, lovely.
So finding my sister and my grandmother in a book upstairs just really made me realize that there is something bigger at play here in where I'm supposed to be at this stage in my life and what I'm supposed to be doing and the responsibilities that I have.
Yeah.
And so I feel particularly drawn to the Legacy Art Gallery because of all of these things that they have in their collection and in their library that are my family, And I'd like to add that about maybe 2 months ago, preparing for this show, I was looking for a receipt of Robert Aller's. He bought a hat off Lena Jumbo, and I was searching for the receipt in his file we have upstairs in our filing cabinets. And I pulled out these photographs of Cree children in Manitoba preparing a Christmas exhibit called A Cree Bethlehem. So finding my dad, I found pictures in that file, in Robert Aller's file upstairs, and I was very excited to see that we had some documentation of the other photos and paintings created by the children in that school. I had never seen them before, so seeing the other paintings was just so incredible. And there was a group of little boys surrounded by Robert Aller, and I took a picture for my mom and dad, and I sent it home to them to look at. And a few hours later, my mom sent me a message, and she said, do you know which one's your dad? And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that my dad's actually in this picture. I've never seen any photos of my dad. And in the picture, the kids are all surrounding a piece of art they're looking at, and they're all smiling with Robert Aller looking at the art. And so that was just such a beautiful picture. And yeah, I was very, very surprised that my dad was in the photo. And when I look at it, I look, oh, that kind of looks like me, you know, like when I was that age, you know, like I could see the resemblance. And so that was very, very precious. And it just made me realize that, you know, we do carry our ancestors wherever we go. And I feel very grateful and blessed that I can say that and believe it and know it to be true in my own life. So I'm very, as I said, grateful for that.
Would you like to tell us where you're planning to go next with your curatorial projects and things you'd like to develop further down the road after this exhibition?
Yeah, so I think I'd really like to continue to work with the baskets and continue to try to find out their provenance and who made them. I am also looking forward to creating a public art tour on campus of the Coast Salish art.
That'll be great.
Yeah, and really producing the tour to talk about the laws and the stories in the art on campus, and how important it is for people coming to UVic to know that this is Coast Salish territory and to know the stories and the laws of this land.
That sounds very valuable.
Yeah, so it's part of this. Mary Jo and had applied for the strategic funding, and we got.
And what's the timeline for that?
So the public art tour will be rolled out next fall.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and so we're hoping to have that going, and it's going to be a tour that will be given to, of course, new students, faculty, staff, and for the public.
Fantastic.
So, and looking forward to a beading exhibition. A beading exhibition in 2021.
And will that be here?
That will be here in the main space, and it will be in collaboration with the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria and Open Space.
Oh, nice. Oh, we'll look forward to that. Yeah.
Very excited.
Yeah.
Again, looking at things that were made by Indigenous women that, sometimes, again, that the knowledge of who made these things is lost.
Yes, exactly.
So,
yeah. Oh, terrific. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts and experiences. We're very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.